at. Response options depend on accurate predictions of future impacts. That means more science, better predictive science. We can breed heat-tolerant crops, but this takes time and investment capital. It doesn't happen overnight. Anybody who works in plant breeding knows it's a slow process. We can try and control things like development in areas threatened by sea level rise or flooding, which is very relevant to the region. But the real thing we can try and do is to have policies that avoid climate scenarios and impose unacceptable social and economic costs. Are there opportunities to reduce agricultural emissions? Yes, they're classified into two categories: demand side. Reducing waste and loss in food production would make a big contribution. More than 30% of food is wasted now, owing to a lot of causes: poor transportation systems, spoilage, the fact that we don't consume everything that we take. 30% of our agricultural production is lost through waste. Encouraging diet changes. Meat consumption, as I've already mentioned, is highly inefficient, and reduce overconsumption where it's applicable. This is on the demand side. On the supply side, the management changes in land and livestock are possible. Terrestrial carbon stocks can be increased by sequestration in soils and biomass. Soils are a big sink for the sequestration of carbon if managed properly. Substitution of fossil fuels by biomass providing certain conditions are met. I'm not so sure that the biomass as a fuel source has turned out to be that good a solution. But and there's a health dimension to our agricultural production system as it has evolved. And the health dimension has several pieces. One is foodborne illness. Foodborne illness is very prevalent, and it's a source of mortality and health system costs. Right now, we're having, for example, an episode of E. coli contamination of romaine lettuce in the United States, apparently produced by some farms near Yuma, Arizona. So far, they haven't been able to identify where the source of the contamination was. In other cases, they've identified sources of contamination that are associated with large feedlots that happen to be upstream from food packing facilities that are a perfect situation for creating foodborne diseases. Another issue related to this is that we treat these diseases with antibiotics, and we're facing a crisis in antibiotic resistance. The link between obesity and highly processed foods is clearly established. Over the last 20 years, the world has entered an obesity epidemic. And there are huge public health costs associated with it, as well as personal costs. People get diseases like diabetes and hypertension that they needn't have had, but it's because of poor nutrition. That adds an extra burden on the public health system, and it shortens the lives of the affected people. These highly processed, sugar-intense foods are a special threat to the urban poor who are highly dependent on these sources of foods. I've already hit on the external costs of the public health system. So can we be better than the production of locally grown healthy foods? And can we find ways to create incentives that make that a better option for these very high-calorie, sugar-intensive foods? And finally, there are problems with micronutrient deficiencies, which have effects on childhood development and need to be managed effectively. But so now the third leg of this stool is governance. And I'm trying to indicate as I go along that governance is essential. We can't address these problems without effective governance. And governance is responsible for a lot of research and education, for safety and regulation, for agricultural policies ranging from subsidies and price support, soil conservation policies, to weather forecasting and trade policies. These are all part of the governance, the public investment in making this complicated system work. And another big piece of governance was the Paris Accords, which was a huge achievement in trying to get global agreement on carbon emissions. Unfortunately, that has now been set back by the actions of the administration of the United States, but hopefully that may change in the future. Governance is essential. What are the governance needs? One thing that is greater cooperation, greater regional cooperation that helps address the problems of specific parts of the region through collective effort. We need to strengthen some of these institutions, and Caribbean CARICOM is an example. The Organization of American States could be an example, although it's not at the present time. We need to do better with climate-related disaster assistance as a collective. Look at the situation in Puerto Rico, where I think that we have failed to address some of those problems. Similarly, the earthquake disaster aftermath in Haiti, both parts of the Caribbean. And we need enhanced cooperation in education and research. Those are some of the governance needs. Societal and economic impacts related to food security. The other really big threat is political instability, failed states, and conflict. This is the greatest threat to food security. People are driven out of their homes, like is happening in Syria, become refugees, have inadequate access to everything, education, effective food supplies, and political instability, conflict induce large-scale migrations of populations, which are hard to absorb and hard to manage, and which we're seeing now in Europe and in the United States and elsewhere, generate political backlash. So in the future, where will the world's food come from? Well, there's not a whole lot of arable land left to put into cultivation. So the estimate is that only about 5% of the growth in agricultural production will come from increases in arable land. It will account for about 80% in developing countries. On average, crop yield increases, though, will be only about half, about 0.8% per year of the historical level of 1.7%. Why is that? Because much of what we're looking at historically is the benefit of the Green Revolution, and we have pretty much fully exploited those applications. Expansion of irrigation will have to play a big role. About 28% of food production resulting from efficiencies gained from the expansion of irrigation. But water withdrawals will increase to about 11% of available freshwater supplies. And pressures on renewable water resources from irrigation will remain severe. So that's where it's thought to come from. Now, I want to say a few words about that book that is on display down there. So given this picture of the future, and given the challenges of feeding the world, the academies of the Americas, 22 science academies, which belong to this network called the Inter-American Network of Academies of Sciences, plus 3 regional academies, the Caribbean Academy of Science, the Caribbean Scientific Union, and the Latin American Academy, all got together and developed a book of country assessments. Why country assessments? Because all policy is set by national governments in this region. There is really no supranational policy setting organization. So country assessments are tailored to send a message to country policy makers. The book, there are 232 co-authors who contributed to this. A minimum of 4 per country assessment, and they were selected in a way to balance the disciplinary areas associated with food and nutrition security. But 232 people from across the hemisphere actually contributed a substantial amount of their time and energy to writing these country assessments. The books are free as PDFs on the IANUS website, and there is a standalone summary, a separate book, which is about a 50-page summary of the content of the country chapters that is also available, and it's in both Spanish and English. The major book is in Spanish on PDFs, but the printed publication is only in English. So this is the Caribbean chapter, which we owe a great debt to our colleagues here in the Caribbean who contributed to this chapter. And what does it tell us? It tells us some very disturbing facts. One is at least 60% of the food supply in the CARICOM countries is imported from elsewhere. It's a huge dependency on imported food in the Caribbean. That means the Caribbean region is highly vulnerable to climate change and extreme climatic events, as we've seen with things like Hurricane Maria. The Caribbean is not competitive with industrial agriculture as practiced in large North and South American countries, which means you have to find other ways to be competitive and establish governmental policies that incentivize the kinds of local production that lead to healthy diets and that can be done on small-scale farms. Right now, the Caribbean is overly dependent on highly processed foods. There's a high burden of obesity and other food-related illnesses. So other key points from the Caribbean chapter: resources, volatility in food production and prices, barriers to trade, outdated technologies, high incidence of pests and diseases, and climate change. The small economies of the Caribbean are experiencing slow trading activity coupled with slow growth in the region. The food import bill has essentially doubled between 2000 and 2011 and is likely to double again by 2020. In addition, according to the authors of the Caribbean chapter, there is a lack of an enabling environment to foster innovation in agriculture. Food prices are weak and driven by socioeconomic and political forces. There's easy access to sugary, ultra-processed, and fatty foods that has exacerbated the incidence of obesity and chronic non-communicable diseases. Now, the leading cause of premature mortality in the Caribbean. A major burden, and this is a major burden to the health systems, the national health systems of the countries of the Caribbean. So, a key recommendation, and I've listed the authors of the chapters, and I just want to point out that Mark Rivera was a wonderful person to work with, and he served as the chapter coordinator for the Caribbean chapter, and it's a very fine document, which I hope they will publish separately as a standalone document in order to talk to the governments in the region. The coordinated production of value-added products using local commodities can sustain the future by minimizing the food import bill, thereby supporting the Caribbean common market and fostering food and nutrition security. So that's from our colleagues in the Caribbean. So just as a wrap-up, the food, water, climate system is a strongly interacting system with multiple feedback loops. The link between deforestation and agriculture is well established. The link between water management, irrigation, and food yields per unit arable land is clear. Expansion of pests and diseases will occur with climate change. Time, these things don't happen instantaneously, but they feed back, and these complex interactions and feedback loops mean that this is a systems level problem. It's not a single factor problem. You have to manage the system in its entirety. And the role of policy and international cooperation is crucial for tourism. Some additional conclusions are, we set out to ask, can the world feed 10 billion? And the answer, we think, is yes, the world can feed 10 billion people. The Americans will have to be a big part of that solution. The greatest threat to food security, as I've already argued, are failed states in conflict. And one only needs to look at Venezuela to see here's a well-endowed and otherwise wealthy country which is experiencing severe food shortages because of government governance failure. Mitigation and adaptation to climate change is going to be possible. Agriculture, as I've already argued, is responsible for a significant part of greenhouse gas emissions, but there is good hope for technological innovations that can help mitigate some of this. Management of the water, energy, food nexus has a potential to conserve water and to enhance uses of renewable energy in agriculture. Right now, there are conflicts between energy and water management. Energy, water storage, for example, used for electricity generation conflicts with demands for water for agricultural production. We need to manage these conflicts better. There are also conflicts between bioenergy and food production. Healthy diets and nutritional awareness. Perverse cost incentives promote the consumption of high-caloric processed foods and contribute to public health problems. We can manage perverse cost incentives. These are a matter of public policy. So I just end by thanking you. I thought I would show you pictures of some of the reports that my own academy has done over the years. Things that we're proud of is that we style ourselves as advisors to the nation on science and technology issues. And we do that advice by putting together major reports on important issues. So thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Well, thank you very much to Professor Michael Clegg for that wide-ranging discussion on food security, food issues in the Americas. I think I did quite a lot. And I really wonder if the work at 10 billion. That's right. Thank you very much. I think we can dedicate 10 minutes to questions. We have something, so we would like to ask anywhere. So we just spent a little while for with questions. There's a 100.
Thank you very much, and deeply appreciate your presentation. Coming back to the end point of view regards to the problems in the Caribbean and Latin America, and I pretty much put it in a nutshell where we have this balance in terms of both agricultural technology, when I use the word technology, the whole ambit, and the fit, the right fit, where the post-greenhouse agriculture production system is biased to North American diet and crop and protein science. Why I say that, the fit into the tropical soils of Latin American Caribbean do not fit that model. Also too, applications of agricultural production is also owned by it outside, pretty much North American technology capabilities, from the seed to the production technology to the market. So this end point of where we were formerly exporters of agriculture, we are importers of agriculture. The question I'm putting to you is two questions. One, it comes back to the last point you made, the diet. The type of diet that the Latin American Caribbean fits, it's not appropriate in quotations, the cereal diet, the high meat production diet, because you go to meat production in livestock of cows and dairy, you're gonna impact on our biodiversity and our landscape doesn't fit that sort of production standards. Also, to the seed production doesn't fit into the cereals and so forth. So I come back to the question of diet. Should we really be focusing on our own tropical crops and that are fitted to our ecology and environment? That's one. And the second question is ownership of agricultural technology to be indigenous and to be empowered to be able to produce our own with our own technology. Thank you.
Well, I think that there's these two things are interrelated. I think there's real scope for looking at the policy environment of the Caribbean and asking how it can be altered in a way that incentivizes local production more and therefore incentivizes the production of more healthy foods. One of the, the governments manage, in a sense, the economic system under which these things happen. And they are able to make policy changes if they wish that can help address some of these issues. In the Great Depression in the United States, the Roosevelt administration did quite a number of things related to agriculture, including price supports, land conservation schemes, a lot of things to try and rescue the farm economy, which was in desperate straits. I don't think it's beyond the capability of today's government leaders to consider carefully crafted policy changes that help give an advantage to local agriculture. The highly processed foods have the advantage that they're easy to ship, the wastage is low, and ironically, on a per calorie basis, they're cheaper than other foods. So one solution that's been tried in some places is a sugar tax, which would help equalize the cost barrier somewhat. But all of these things also fall disproportionately on the poor. And so policies have to be crafted in a way that makes provision for the poor having access to adequate diets. So on the technology side, we've got this wonderful legacy of scientific work, and the Caribbean is fully a part of that. I think the barriers to the flow of scientific information are very small, particularly in areas like agriculture. There are some areas that relate to weapons and national security where barriers are high, but not in areas like agriculture. So the best investment here is investments in institutions like this that have people who can fully assimilate and translate new knowledge into the local environment in a way where it has the best effect. So that would be my answers.
So from my understanding, I researched that at the household level and adults, food security can be achieved, right? So to me, I understand that the household level is one of the most important levels because at that stage, reproduction takes place. And the mindset at home could go throughout to the home, the household, to the community, to the national, regional level, etc. So I wanted to know from the topic that we're dealing with, which is successes in food and nutrition security in Latin America, how you all begin to achieve food security from the household level by trying to doctrine or change the mindset of the people at the household level. That's my question to you.
One of the things that we concluded in doing this project was that in the region of the Americas, the Caribbean region is the area of greatest jeopardy. And that's partly because of climate change, but also partly because of an insecure food system. When you're dependent on 60% of your, when you're dependent on imports for 60% of your food supply, you're in great jeopardy to natural disasters and other kinds of disruptive events. And they occur in an unpredictable way. And I think one of the public policy goals ought to be to reduce that dependence on imported food, because it places you in a position of great risk. And when a bad thing happens, like happened in Puerto Rico or in Haiti, it's too late to correct it. It takes time to correct these.
Hello, Professor. My name is Isabella Blackman. I'm a part-time lecturer in the Department of Food Production, and I got my doctorate, PhD at UGA, Athens, Georgia, in the US. In my humble opinion, the reason why we have such a high food import bill is that we consider it prestigious and classy to eat strawberries and other fruits and vegetables from temperate countries. I agree with the young gentleman's point. Households should grow their own food for food security. Stable families build stable communities. Stable communities build stable societies. And stable societies build stable nations. That's my contribution. Thank you.
I guess, we heard a lot about the risks and deficiencies. You're talking about the governance and all systems with regards to agriculture. My question more so was, just in the title, successes. Who, in your opinion, in the Caribbean, or I guess in Latin America, are doing a good job, actually, at food and nutrition security? And what exactly are they getting right?
I'm not sure, but
which countries, in your opinion, in Latin America and the Caribbean are actually doing a good job, are successful at
I see.
Yeah, food and nutrition security?
Well, Argentina, Brazil. Argentina is a major exporter. One of the
and what are they doing right? What are they getting right?
well, read the chapter of Brazil. Very successful, substantial increase in agricultural production, agricultural research organization, and they've been very effective. I think the chapter on Brazil makes that case quite convincing. Argentina has long been a major food exporter because like the United States, it's endowed with large areas of arable land, so they produce an excess of food. Latin America actually is a major food exporter to the rest of the world. And it exports more than North America than the US and Canada combined. So despite that, those are the big countries like Brazil, Argentina, Chile. 18 countries of Latin America are net food importers. So many of the countries in Latin America are not completely self-sufficient from the place. But the biggest problem is credit. And it's important to recognize it in top-tier policymakers to get them to see that. If you look at the response to Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico, it's pretty disappointing. And that's to me a lesson about how much help is going to come from the outside if something bad happens. It's a discouraging lesson. We live in a different era than the era that I grew up in, which was much more globally minded.
We'll take one more question. Okay, the other questions also, but we think this is the last.
Good evening. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak. And that was a very interesting lecture. Thank you very much for providing us with that information. I have a question concerning the smaller islands in the Caribbean, because they have a very, very big challenge because the economy, it just, you know, if you're trying to juggle so many different facets of the economy, you know, food security becomes a very, very big problem. So my question to you is, how would you, what advice or what areas do you think would be opportunities for success for these smaller islands?
Well, you know, I'm not the right person to answer that. You know, when you're tied into this globalized economy, being small is generally not an advantage. And you need to figure out where you can have comparative advantage. Some of the Caribbean's been in tourism, but that has its problems. You know, I think of Costa Rica as a country which has been very creative in developing an alternative model for how to manage its natural resources. It doesn't invest in the military, that gives it extra money to invest in education and research and in the natural environment, which happens to be a very attractive asset for Costa Rica. I don't know whether those sort of models would really scale down to small islands. I just way over my head been trying to guess.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Travis Norman. Thank you all for your time, especially you, Professor. My question here is based on the theme itself specifically. And I understand that we're dealing with a lot of the food security as well as the preservation of the environment and within Latin America and the Caribbean. My question to you is, do you think that through the use and the implementation of renewable energy along the lines of solar and wind turbine generators, do you think that we can increase our food security as well as help preserve the environment within the Caribbean and Latin America?
Yeah, I do think so. I think that a lot of it is policy driven, but I think that there are opportunities to look at the policy environment and change it in ways that are more favorable for the Caribbean. Mark ought to answer this question. He's much more knowledgeable than I am. But I think you can do things. I mean, you don't want to throw up your hands and say, well, the future's hopeless. And there are things that can be done. There are levers that can be moved. And so, one of the challenges, I think, for maybe the Caribbean Academy of Sciences is to try and do some sort of a study on what are the policy options that might be imagined that would increase food security and healthy food available in the Caribbean.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you all very much. Just bring this move on the presentation to the speaker. I guess we'll ask secretary staff. I can call my secretary, my lovely secretary, to present the token to Professor for his time, storm.
Thank you all. It's a pleasure to be here. I really like it.
All right, so move swiftly on to presentation of the book. We had Professor Dr. John. Doctor, please come forward to present the book copy of the book. We invited to the library of the University of St. Augustine campus. We invited the librarian, but we found out it's not to be. So I'd like to invite you're going to receive. All right. Acquisitions librarian. Okay, so you're going to receive it on behalf of the librarian. So, Oliver, Mike, you see it. Okay, the mic is on. Maybe you just tell us the book on the chat this time.
Good night, everybody. I won't stay long. First of all, I would just speaking on behalf of CAS, we are delighted to be invited to be part of this collaboration because it really helps fulfill two of our main goals, which is to be an authoritative voice in science and technology in the Caribbean region, as well as to increase public understanding and awareness of the impact of science and technology on the development of society. So we would like to present this book to Mr. Sandy Campus Librarian. We hope that it will spark and fuel a lot of research in this area. And it is also, the full PDF is also available, just to remind you, on Yana as well.
Here, that's the Spanish version. So,
Thank you very much. So we have two other books here dealing with the topic. One is agricultural development for food security developing nations. The other is environmental sustainability and climate change adaptation strategies. One I think is 12 chapters, I think one is 19 chapters. I'd like to invite you to get the principal to come and receive these also for the library, for the St. Augustine campus. I'd like to ask Dr. Wendy and Isaac, who co-authored these books with myself, to come and make a presentation. Please, Dr. Isaac, come and make a presentation. This book is available on Amazon. They're available on Amazon for sale, and I think so some of the chapters. You can buy the chapters individually. Environmental sustainability and climate change adaptation strategies. Examples from around the world. What the chapters deal with examples from around the world that deal with how they implemented climate change adaptation strategies. That's this. Okay, I'd like Professor Weber to receive the other book. It's titled Agricultural Development and Food Security Developing Nations. And this book also has, I don't remember, so long ago you wrote it. 13 chapters. It's 2016. 13 chapters for agricultural development and food security in developing nations. Okay, so we are editing this book, and so we are contributing editors, and we all look at the experiences around the world. It's good reading material, and it's also available by chapters. So I'd like to present this to Professor. Okay, we come to almost the end of this proceedings. Next, we just like to invite Dr. Martin here with the vote of thanks.
Okay, thank you, Dean. I want us to put our hands together for this wonderful session that we have had this evening. Going to the vote of thanks, I just want to, say, because I sat down there and I was listening to some of the questions that were being asked. I think most of the answers are in that particular book. The Caribbean chapter, when you read it, you will see, we wrote specifically on the Caribbean peculiarities and so on. And so take time, go to ionas.com on, you'll get the PDFs and take time and read them. Thank you. Now, it gives me great pleasure to stand before you after this provoking talk and the interesting discussion that ensued to propose a vote of thanks. According to St. Ambrose, who lived many years than that of returning thanks. And it is the great book which also says, give thanks with a grateful heart. So I take this responsibility with a great sense of duty. To our specially invited guest speaker, Professor Michael Clegg, your willingness and sacrifice to cancel prior important commitments, to accept our invitation on such short notice, underscores your dedication to the important topic of food and nutrition security, particularly to a vulnerable region such as ours. We say thank you. We are grateful for your being with us over the next 2 days as we highlight the importance and urgency of food and nutrition security. And I ask you all to join me again in showing our appreciation to Professor Clegg for this invaluable contribution as we seek to find solutions and make our nation and region food and nutrition secure. I almost said to make our nation great again. Professor Clegg, kindly convey our thanks to Inter-American Network of Academy of Sciences, particularly to Adriana de la Cruz Molina, that's the Executive Director of IANAS, who ensured that funding was obtained to enable you to be here. So we are thankful to her and to IANAS as well. And, both of you worked relentlessly to ensure that the book on the challenges and opportunities for food and nutrition security in the Americas was realized, and that is greatly appreciated. Thanks also go to the Deputy Principal and also to Vice Chancellor Professor Weber for always supporting our faculty. We're really appreciative of that. Your being here is a testimony of your commitment to support what we are doing in the Faculty of Food and Agriculture. Let's give them a round. To the President of CAS, Professor Emeritus Mellows, and his executive, we say thank you. We were able to get Professor Clegg to be here because of your valuable collaboration, and we thank you for that. And to our Dean, Dr. Wengamba, this man, his heart is just, is just like a flint. He is focused on ensuring that this faculty, and since he became dean, things have changed. We have seen, we have seen the focus. The focus has changed. We are now known everywhere. I mean, there's only one faculty that has been able to bring the whole of Trinidad and Tobago on campus, and is as a result of the good work. We want to thank you for your wisdom. We want to thank you for your leadership. Ladies and gentlemen, an event like this does not and cannot happen overnight. The wheels started turning just over 1 month ago. And we have been fortunate enough to have been backed by a team of very motivated and dedicated colleagues and staff of the faculty who knows their job. I'm telling you, these people know their job very well. Who knows their job, and they are also result-oriented. Dr. Hutchinson, my God, when she sets her heart to do something, it will be done. Our, administrative officer with her team, Mrs. Lane, these are wonderful individuals. And I want us to give them a round of applause. And we want to thank every one of you that made time to be here. The sacrifice that you have made to be here is because of your love to see our country become food and nutrition secure. And I want us to put our hands together for ourselves. Finally, the Caribbean Academy of Sciences has a table at the back there. I want you to patronize the table. There are some flyers there. You may want to know how to become a member of this very important organization. So just check them at the back there. Thank you very much. It was a great pleasure having you here. Thank you.
Okay, just hold on 1 second. We just have one thing more for the key principles, why I stick out some like very nice.